So this is how I grew up, and I grew up playing rugby football in my school, and rugby has its rules like all sports, and you play by the rules. But in our society there seem to be no rules, or rather you learnt the rules of a school book saying South Africa's a democracy because all grown-ups can vote for their representatives in Parliament. And I went home and I said, but it's only whites who can vote. Why do they say all grown-ups? Because for a little boy of 10 years old, if you say all adults can, all people can vote, but only whites can vote, it means black people are not people.
And he kept on telling the father, I want to sit on that pony, ride a pony. But the father said, no, you can't sit on it. You can't, because the pony is sick and this and that. But the child said, but if the pony is not well, how the hell can he, why are the other children sitting on it? So the father writes in a letter to the Johannesburg Star and says, how could I tell my 8-year-old child, boy, that you couldn't sit on that pony because of the color of your skin?
And for me as a little boy, this all seemed so unfair. How could it be that we lived as we did and we were not rich? These were the 1930s, the very bad Depression years, the lead up to World War II. I must say I never went hungry because there was always some bread and a gravy from the meat. But there wasn't a lot of food, and it wasn't elaborate food. But when we had visitors, there was always something extra in the pot, because that's the way you make for solidarity with people.
If you divide, if you don't stand together, you won't win. You can't do anything alone. Unity is strength. And Islam teaches that unity is strength. And while he was at his madrasa, he learned a lot of the tactics the British used, and one of their strongest tactics was divide and rule, and they used that all the time. The British used to colonize and to be successful in colonizing. They always used the tactic of divide and rule. That was the strongest weapon the British had.
In 1948, the Afrikaners assumed power. The Nationalist Party, the Nationale Partij, or the Nationalist Party, the Afrikaners, predominantly Afrikaans, they had some few English supporters, but it was Afrikaans. And they assumed power in 1948. And that was the beginning of what was known as the system of apartheid. Now you see, apartheid means separateness. Apartheid, you see, it was a term coined by Dr. Malana or something like that, you understand.
And that is when, in 1952, with Nelson Mandela, Malvi and Nelson Mandela launched the Defiance Campaign. The plan of the Defiance Campaign was Malvi's. He wrote the whole campaign in Urdu because he used to think in Urdu. And my uncle, Yusuf Kachalia, then translated it into English.
The ANC and the Indian Congress, they chose 6 laws, unjust laws. That's why it was known as the campaign for the defiance of unjust laws. You understand? And for short known as the Defiance Campaign, under which volunteers were called upon. The Congress has called upon people to volunteer to go to jail, to defy a law and to go to jail. And told them that, look at this part, doesn't mean that this is going to bring about your freedom, but at least it politicized people.
So he called Walter Sisulu, and together with Walter Sisulu and Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, my father and my uncle, used to have meetings. They used to have meetings at our house in Forsberg. It was number 11 Luther Street, that was in Forsberg, where my father lived then. And they used to have discussions and meetings and how to take the struggle forward, because the Indians and Africans actually were not allowed to sit together in one room, and they were not allowed to have such discussions. So it was all private, secret discussions. They used to always have private meetings. Nelson Mandela wasn't free to just come to our home. He used to come quietly because it was an Indian home. He wasn't allowed to socialize with Indians.
9,000 people courted voluntary imprisonment. You understand? People who said, look, we are defying this law. We are going to sit on this bench. We are going to go into that post office that says for whites only. If you went to a post office, whites only, blacks only. You went to the station, whites only, blacks only. You know, we did that. You know, these were, go to the zoo, go to a park. The benches had there, clearly, for whites only. You couldn't sit. If you sat on that bench, you were violating the law and you would go to jail. You understand? So this was part of the campaign to politicize our people.
In 1955, we had a Congress of the People, which after thousands of meetings all over South Africa, drew up a freedom charter which said South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white together, and set out what people wanted in a free South Africa.
It says, we, the people of South Africa, black and white, declare for all our country and the world to know that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, and that no government can justly claim authority unless it is based on the will of all the people.
In effect, we fight white supremacy, not whites. There's a place for all, not just the majority black Africans, but coloured, Indian and whites. What we have to do is accept everybody as equal. That's what's necessary. And this is a remarkable act of generosity of an oppressed people. You've oppressed us, you've taken our land, you've made us live in poverty, our children die of starvation. In the Eastern Cape province, where my friends come from, it was said a half of all children were dead by the age of 5 years, from hunger, from disease, no medical care, no clinics. And yet they say, you have a place here. Such an act of generosity, I think, is quite exceptional.
And that document became a banned document. The police surrounded us. We were 3,200 or 300 delegates in an open square.
But we did not take up arms until after the massacre at Sharpeville in 1960, where some thousands of people came together, not led by the ANC on this occasion, but by the Pan-Africanist Congress, at a place called Sharpeville near Johannesburg. They came together to hand in their passes. It was like an internal passport that only African men had to have. And the police opened fire on them, killed 69. 69 people were dead in a few minutes. Nearly 200 were badly wounded.
And they took up arms. And there was a little bit of a question about the armed struggle. There were members in the ANC and the TIC that disagreed, and they were a little bit worried about Maulvi, that he would disagree on the armed struggle because he was a very strong supporter of the passive resistance. But he on the grounds of the way the Prophet took up arms when he left Makkah and went to Medina, and when he went to Medina they took up arms. When the time came, they had to. So Maulvi felt that Islamically it was okay, it was the right thing to do if you looked at our Prophet's life.
We have to change our tactics now. Until now, we have spoken the language of non-violent resistance. We said that we will continue non-violence. From now on, we are now going to embark on what is known as an armed revolutionary struggle. That was the beginning of Umkhonto we Sizwe, the military wing of the ANC. You understand?
And then I joined Umkhonto we Sizwe because I was technically trained, and black comrades were not allowed technical training. And I felt if my father had only 6 years of school, but could send me to university because I'm a white South African, I must do something with that privilege. I can't just keep it for me. And so I became a technical person in Umkhonto we Sizwe, the guy who had to make the weapons and find the targets.